our lecture tonight, the topic of which is Nonviolence, Option or Obligation, Theological Perspectives. And our speaker tonight is Dr. Charles C. McCarthy. Dr. McCarthy got his doctorate in civil law from Boston College and also received a master's degree in theology at Notre Dame University. While at Notre Dame, he also founded and directed the Center for Nonviolent Conflict Resolution. The format for tonight is that Dr. McCarthy will first talk for somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour. Then we will open it up for discussion and questions. So we'd like to ask you that if you do have a question to write it down and save it for the end of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Well, good evening. Good evening. The title of the talk is Nonviolence, Option or Obligation. And theological perspective, okay? Theological perspective, as they say. The specific kind of approach that I take to this is that I happen to be a Christian, okay? So that the theological perspective out of which I'm coming is Christianity. Now, if at the end of the talk we would like to talk about nonviolence in terms of some of the other religions and so forth, that is perfectly fine. But I think by my presenting it out of my perception of religion, that I can give you a more authentic presentation, and certainly some of what I say is simply transferable to Buddhism, Islamism, Judaism, and so forth. Some of it is not. So, in order to begin that, I think a good place to begin any discussion theologically is with the creation, okay? I think that's a good start. If we don't go back far enough, we may not agree on what we're talking about. So, in order to begin at the creation, what we have to ask ourselves is, and reflect on, is that existence is either an accident or it is a gift. There is no other possibility. Existence is either an accident or a gift. Either we're here by some combination accidentally that molecules came together and amino acids and boom, somehow this kind of life comes into existence and in a few million years or a trillion years or whatever passes out and so forth, purely accident. Or we're here because we were given existence. The thing that we're sure of is we didn't bring ourselves into existence. That's for absolutely certain. We did not bring ourselves. So either we're here by accident or we're here by gift. Now, if we are here by gift, if we're here by gift, it's a little, probably a little obvious, but if we're here by gift, then there's a giver. Then there's a giver. Right? To have a gift, there must be a giver. And of course, if there's a giver, the giver gave us existence for some purpose. Gave us existence for some purpose. Now, I think it should be pointed out, just as a passing comment in terms of atheism, And atheism is a legitimate faith stance, It's a legitimate faith stance no one. In terms of atheism, which is this here, a non-theistic universe, there is neither gift nor giver, but there is also no purpose. There is also no purpose in an atheistic universe. The only purpose in an atheistic universe is pretty much coping. There is no ultimate purpose. And I think it would behoove us, for those of us who are interested in that sort of world, the world of atheism, one form or another, not to be glib about it. I think it would do us well, for example, to spend a little time reading, for example, Jean-Paul Sartre. And Sartre is very, very clear, no purpose. There is coping, period. But if there is a gift, if existence is not just accident, but indeed if it's a gift, and if there's a giver, then there is purpose. But the question becomes then, what is the purpose of existence? What is the purpose of existence? Now, all religions, all philosophies try to tell us what the purpose of existence is. And I'm sure that you men and women have been around long enough to know that there are just about as many different purposes given for existence as there are religions and philosophies. And that would raise, it would seem, some kind of problem, huh? For example, whatever you think the purpose of existence is at this moment, okay? Whatever you think the purpose of, how did you get to that point? Well, one answer might be, my mother told me, my father told me the purpose of existence was this. Yeah, but someone else's mother and father in another part of the world told them a totally different purpose. Or, my priest or my minister told me, or the religious community that I belong told me this was the purpose of existence. Yeah, but another religious community someplace, another part of the world told people a different purpose. How do you know the purpose that you have? How do you know the purpose that you have for existence is in fact the purpose of existence? Well, you know and I know, for example, that we are purposeful beings, huh? That is, if I want to record this talk that I'm giving on a tape recorder or on a radio for a radio show or something, I put on this microphone. If we want to leave the room, we simply walk out. But we purposefully, if we want to leave and want to go out that door, we don't walk into the wall. We're purposeful beings. Now, it's kind of strange. When we don't know the purpose of existence, we still have a purpose in existence. When we don't know the purpose of existence, then the purpose of existence automatically is to search for the purpose. And that is purposeful existence, searching for the purpose of existence. That's very, very purposeful existence. Very, very valid way to live. To admit to oneself that one does not know the purpose of existence, and then to say, my purpose is now to search for the purpose of existence. And so the question becomes how to go about that. How to go about that. How to go about searching for the purpose of existence. And people have gone about it in a lot of ways, huh? They've gone about it in a lot of ways. There were people, for example, who thought, and still do think, that one of the ways to go about finding out the purpose of existence is, in fact, to use reason. Reason, the use of the logical mind, will, in fact, tell us the purpose of existence. That is a method for going about the search for the purpose for which we have existence. Well, a lot of folks proceed that way, and not many folks have found that satisfactory. Not many folks have honestly found that satisfactory. Why not? Well, let's suppose, let me see, suppose this circle that I'm going to draw here now, suppose this circle that I'm going to draw, gee, we better get rid of this, it's got to be big enough. Suppose this circle that I'm going to draw, suppose that circle represents all reality, past, present, and future. That circle represents every molecule that ever existed, every thought that was ever thought, every relationship, every moment of every relationship. That circle represents all reality, okay, that ever was and ever will be. Now, out of all reality that ever was and ever will be, how much reality does any one person ever know? Just a dot. Just a dot. That's all. How much reality out of all reality will you ever know in your entire existence, huh? That dot, that'd be too big. Gee. A tiny little bit, that's all we know. That's all we ever perceive of reality, that little dot. Okay. However, from that little dot of reality, that is all we have to use logic on. We have no other material to employ logical methodology but with that little dot. That little bit of reality is all there is for us to be reasonable about. What we don't know, we can't be reasonable about. That's obvious. What we don't know, we can't be reasonable about. And so, that's the first breakdown in simply using reason as a methodology for finding out the purpose of existence. The second breakdown becomes rather overwhelming. And that is, sooner or later, each one of us comes in contact with a rather awesome phenomena. And that phenomena is that we are going to die. So in trying to determine, in our search for the purpose of human existence, in trying to determine what the purpose of human existence is, one of the central things we've got to consider is we're going to die. We can't ignore the evidence. Everyone around us seems to be dying at an allotted time, and by golly, in all probability, we're going to die too. Maybe 5 minutes or 5 years or 50 years, but it's going to happen, huh? And so, in using reason to try to figure out the purpose of human existence, what takes place is that we come rather quickly to the realization that in the face of death, reason is utterly, completely, totally, unequivocally, and forever powerless. Reason cannot give a single moment of existence after the last breath. Try as you will, employ reason as you will, reason cannot tell you how to stay in existence 1 second after your last breath. Reason just buckles when it comes to the reality of death. One of the great people dealing with this, to show you how someone struggled with this business of reason and death and so forth. If you get a chance sometime, read the writings of Marcus Aurelius. Very, 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 very sincere and serious person. Roman emperor, trying to use reason as a method for fathoming the purpose of human existence, and then coming smack up against the problem of his own mortality. Because my own mortality is what, huh? My own mortality is, by golly, I not only go out of existence, but from all appearances, everyone I love goes out of existence, all loving relationships, everything, huh? I die like the ant. There's a certain protection that some of us brought up in the Christian tradition have, huh? Protection against the possibility of our own oblivion, our own total annihilation that we have. You know, if we're nurtured long enough in some dimensions of the Christian tradition, the problem of death is implanted on the mind as the problem of going to some place where there's a fire and a Mr. Spock-like character with a pitchfork. Right? But for most people in the world, most of the time, the problem of death is utter and total annihilation, oblivion forever. And when reason confronts the problem of death, reason knows no other option. That is, reason dictates that since there is no evidence that is open to reason that anyone ever comes back, that it appears as if, up to this moment in time, oblivion is it. Oblivion is it. At any rate, the problem of death, when reason confronts it, there's no answer. Reason does not give an answer to the problem of death. I would suggest also, and I won't go into this in any sort of extensive sort of way, simply because of the time, that's all. But if you work with it yourself, you'll find out. Reason also buckles in the face of the problem of evil. Reason has no answer to the problem of evil. No way to overcome it. The history of reason at this moment in time has produced a further and further deepening of the spiral of evil. There's been no way, if you stop, and all I mean by this is nothing more than experienced evil, experienced evil. That is, that in the face of not only the evil out there in political and economic structures and in war, but the evil internally, all the stuff that we think of and all the petty hates and lust and greeds and so forth and just the reason when it really confronts the reality, it knows not what to do. It knows not what to do. But at any rate, this is not all I'm saying is that reason is one method that people go about searching for the purpose of existence. One method. Now, and it's probably the first method people use all over the place. It's probably the first method people use. However, when we reach the point that it becomes clear that reason in and of itself cannot validate for us the purpose for human existence, especially in light of what the limited perspective we have, the little dot in the middle of all the thing, because that's the stuff that reason works with. Then what folks have done and what people do is they go looking for extra reasonable sources to find out what the purpose of existence is. That's what they go looking for. Extra reasonable sources. Some go looking for, some go to oracles, They go to oracles to try to hear the voice of the giver. To try to hear the voice of the giver. If the giver is somehow talking in ways that are other than reasonable, somehow communicating in ways that are other than merely reasonable, that's what they go looking for. So they go to oracles and they try to get some extra reasonable information on this. Information beyond reason, beyond what reason can give, on the purpose of existence, on how to overcome evil and death. Or they go to birds, augury. Augury. The giver of existence communicates through the way birds, or stars, Stars, the giver, or drugs. Drugs is a normal part of religious life, Normal part of some religions. Peyote and so forth. Just every day. So they go to extra reasonable sources. The technical term for that is revelation. They go looking for revelation when reason fails, that's all. When reason fails to give the purpose of existence, to tell people how to stay in existence one moment after their last breath and so forth, people go looking for revelation. And so, for example, they go looking to specially anointed people sent by God to tell them what the purpose of existence is. Specially anointed people sent by God to tell them what the purpose of existence is, how to overcome evil and death, and so forth. Specially anointed, anointed, anointed. The Hebrew word for anointed is Messiah. The Greek word, Christ. Christ is the specially anointed from God that communicates the purpose of human existence and how to overcome evil and death. Christ is the Messiah, anointed Messiah. Christ, the word Christ is just the Greek for Messiah. Christ is the specially anointed from God that reveals to humanity beyond reason how to overcome evil and death. Well, Christ isn't the only Messiah. I mean, he's not the only one on whom the name Messiah was placed. At the time of Jesus of Nazareth, there were as many Messiahs in the Judean, Galilean, Near East section. There were as many Messiahs in that area as there are today in Southern California. They're all over the place, huh? You could hardly pick up People magazine without finding a new Messiah in it. Some guy that only a year and a half ago was putting shingles on roofs, today he's a Messiah. So the question becomes, the question becomes the same question to each one of us that was put to Peter. Jesus put the question to Peter, who do you say I am? Now, Peter could have said, he could have said, oh, well, you're a nice guy, huh? And so forth. Good friend. But no, Peter said, you are the Messiah, Son of the living God. You are the one, you are the specially anointed from God to communicate the purpose of human existence, how to overcome evil and death. Now, at this point here, it becomes important to realize that one does not accept the teachings of Jesus about what the purpose of human existence is and how to overcome evil and death unless one answers the question the same way Peter answers it. For simply to say that Jesus is another wise man like Aristotle or Plato or Buddha or I don't know, someone, Johnny Carson. I mean, Aristotle never made $3 million a year. Right, to say that means Jesus is just another guy, puts his pants on one leg at a time, and we can judge what he's saying in terms of the way we judge all other human beings, Aristotle, Plato, Einstein, and so forth, But to say he's Messiah, see, if we say he's just another human being, like Aristotle, Plato, and so forth, then it means that this is the person's eye view, the human eye view, right down here, the human eye view. See, if you say he's just another being, another human being, then by golly, this is all of existence he knows right here. And that's what he's communicating to us. And who's to say his little piece of existence that he knows is better than our little piece of existence? But if you say he's the Messiah, the anointed from God to communicate the purpose of existence, the way to overcome evil and death and so forth, then what you're saying is he is communicating God's eye view on things. God's eye view on things. He's communicating as the whole picture. He knows the whole picture. He's communicating from a view that knows the whole picture. Now that makes a tremendous difference. Okay? And one should really not be a Christian unless, unless one honestly and truly believes that Jesus is the Messiah. That's what the name means, Christ, Messiah. That one, he is in fact communicating God's eye view. We say that. Jesus is the ultimate revealer of the will of God. Will of God is just another term for the purpose for which we exist. The will of God. What is the will of God for us is the same way of saying is what is the purpose for which we exist. Jesus is the ultimate revealer of God's will. That's it. Jesus speaks about what is the way to live, what is the purpose of existence, how to overcome evil and death, not from the point of view of a little bit of reality that he has like we and I have, you and I have, but from this view, from a view of all time and space and reality and eternity. And then, of course, the very name first used in Antioch, the very name Christian, means precisely that. People who are followers of a Messiah, the Messiah, in this case, Jesus. Now, if you think Maharaji Guru, if you think he has God's eye view, then you're a follower of Maharaji Guru. And so forth and so on. Now, if you think no one has, your follower, no one. Right? Now, what I'm going to say to you from this point on forward comes from, and we can talk about this at some time down the line if you want, comes from the fact that indeed I answer the question the same way Peter answers it. Who is Jesus? I say he is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Now, that being the case, certain things follow. Because then I have to ask myself, if I say he's the Messiah, then what does the Messiah say is the purpose of existence? What does the Messiah say is the way to overcome the ultimate irrationalities in existence, evil and death? Simply to say Jesus is the Messiah doesn't mean you know what he says is the way to live or the way to overcome evil and death. So we go looking in Holy Scripture, and we find that Jesus says very, very explicitly what's the purpose of existence and how to overcome evil and death. Jesus says, love the Lord your God, whole heart, whole soul, whole mind, whole strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do this, and eternal life is yours. That's pretty straightforward. No fooling around. No playing with, symbolism and so forth. Just a very straightforward statement, Love the Lord your God, whole heart, whole soul, whole mind, whole strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do this, and eternal life is yours. Talk about just laying it on the line, the way to live, That's pretty straightforward. And if you say he's the Messiah, by golly, that's God's eye view. God is saying that. This is the way to live. How clear can you make it? Well, we got to reflect on this a little bit because, those words, love the Lord your God, whole heart, whole soul, whole mind, whole strength, love your neighbor as yourself, those words Jesus didn't make up. Those aren't his words. Those words are direct quotes out of Deuteronomy and Leviticus, word for word. He did not say that originally. So we have to ask ourselves, what is it that Jesus is saying that Moses isn't saying? Those words are 2 of the 613 laws of the Torah. So what is it that Jesus is saying that Moses isn't saying? Because Moses said, the Torah says, love the Lord your God, whole heart, whole soul, whole mind, whole strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. What's unique about Jesus? Why did he have to come? What's the difference between Judaism and Christianity? Well, think about it a little bit. it's probably not possible for you to imagine, or for me to imagine, any atrocity that hasn't been done in the name of love. The problem with the commandment, love the Lord your God, whole heart, whole soul, whole mind, whole strength, love your neighbor as yourself, indeed it existed 500 years before Jesus, maybe more than that. The problem with it is, what does the word love mean? That's the key to it, because depending upon what you mean by love, you're going to get an entirely different commandment with each interpretation of love. And so, we know, for example, everything from infanticide to atomic war has been done in the name of love. And I mean that literally. I know the fellow, personally, that in the name of love dropped the atomic bomb on Nagasaki, Urakami. And Charlie says he dropped it out of love. Extraordinary. He is a Catholic man, and he drops the atomic bomb on top of the largest Catholic community in Japan, Nagasaki. The oldest Catholic community in Japan, Nagasaki. The Catholic community that St. Francis Xavier himself founded when he first went to Japan, Nagasaki. And he drops the atomic bomb on top of it, and 40,000 Catholics are wiped out in an instant. 3 religious orders of nuns are wiped out in an instant. Between 100 and 200,000 people are maimed instantly and continue to suffer to this day, many of them. And he did it in the name of love. And he said it. Now, I don't want to judge him. All I'm using that example for is atomic war has been conducted in the name of love. Why, just the other day, 3 weeks ago, you probably read in the paper here, a woman from New York took her 20-month-old baby, scalded the baby, and then took the baby and put it in a 450-degree oven and burnt it to death in the name of love, because the baby was crying and she was exorcising it. She was driving evil out of it in the name of love. So, the great commandment, love the Lord your God, whole heart, whole soul, whole mind, whole strength, love your neighbor as yourself. The serious problem with it is, what does the word love mean? Love as I have loved. This I command you, love as I have loved. At another place he says, I command you, love one another as I have loved you. Right? Now, the importance of that commandment, the importance of that teaching is, what Jesus does is, he and he alone becomes the model of what it means to love. He and he alone becomes the model of what it means to love. And indeed, as far back as the earliest documents of Christianity, by earliest I mean the second full century of Christianity, the imitation of Christ has been an acceptable and a wide-known spiritual methodology. That is, on a day-in, day-out basis, there must be some way to live Christianity and to know what Christ wants that doesn't require you getting a PhD from Harvard in divinity. Christianity must be interpretable, without a PhD from Harvard divinity. Most of the people Jesus talked to were utterly and completely illiterate. Most of the people the early apostles talked to were illiterate, and they understood perfectly well. what is the relationship on a very practical, down-to-earth, day-in, day-out basis between the great commandment, which Jesus says is the way to eternal life, and the only commandment that Jesus proclaims that is uniquely his own? Love as I have loved. The relationship is that in order to follow the great commandment, in order to live the love that's talked about in the great commandment, one must use Jesus as the exclusive model. What does that mean in practical, on how to love? What does that mean in practical human affairs? It means this. All I have to do as a follower of Jesus, as a Christian, to determine whether an action is acceptable or unacceptable is simply to say, would Jesus have done it? That's all. Would Jesus have done this action? All I'm asking is, if the action I want to do, if I can picture Jesus doing it, well, by golly, you know, as he walked the face of the earth, if I can picture him doing it, then by golly, I can do it. I'm loving as he would have loved. If I can't picture him doing it, then by golly, I can't do it. Because I'm not loving like he would have loved. So up in Salem, Massachusetts, where I come from, we had a few folks that used to burn witches. Now, if you want to burn witches in good Christian conscience, all you have to do is prove that Jesus would have burned witches. That Jesus would have taken a woman and tied her to a stake and took piles of wood, if you can picture him taking the wood and putting it around the woman and putting some leaves and stuff, and then lighting it and standing back and watching it go up in flames. If you can picture Jesus doing that, then you can do it. Because then you're loving, then you're living, then you're imitating Jesus. But if you can't picture Jesus doing it, you can't do it. You can't do it. Very simple formula. Nothing complicated. Love as I have loved. That's all you have to do to follow the great commandment. Eternal life is yours, promises Jesus. Do this and eternal life is yours. And so, one has to ask the question, is it possible as a Christian, or is it possible as someone saying that Jesus is the Messiah, is it possible to picture Jesus, for example, machine gunning people to death? Huh? Is it possible to picture Jesus with a flamethrower blowing, torching people's heads off? Is it possible to picture Jesus slitting someone's throat with a bayonet? If it's not possible to picture Jesus doing that, then how can Christians engage in war? Because that's the stuff of war, the real stuff, not the John Wayne movies and so forth. That's the real stuff. The ripping out of guts and the blowing off of heads. The destruction of human life. If you can't picture Jesus doing it, then how can you do it? Because how can you be loving like Christ loved? How can you be fulfilling the purpose of existence, the purpose for which God gave you existence? The giver gave you existence. It's a most serious problem. And it makes no difference what denomination of Christianity you deal in. It's a serious problem. And you say, well, there must be something here because obviously Christians have been engaged in war for an awful long time. And gee, all those Christians couldn't have been wrong. Indeed. There is no sociologically identifiable group in the last 1,700 years that has slaughtered more people in war than that group that can be identified as Christians. Christians are the great slaughterers in war. So indeed they have engaged in it. However, there was a time when Christians didn't engage in war. There was a time when the universal church taught, without exception, Christians shouldn't engage in war. Indeed, that Christians couldn't even use violence for self-defense. What time was that? The first 300 years after Jesus, the church was non-violent. There is no exception. There is no father or mother of the church writing in the first 300 years saying anything other than, one, Christians cannot engage in war. Two, Christians cannot use violence for personal self-defense. It is a universal teaching from Alexandria to Rome. There is not a single document that reads other than, for 300 years. That's 100 years longer than the United States has been in existence. Incredible. The years closest to Jesus taught unequivocally that Christians could not deal in war. And mind you, this was these Christians were not folks who were, they were not sitting back in an ivory tower, you know, and going up to the theological section of the library and rummaging through books and deciding could they or could they not engage in war and so forth. None of that. This is a teaching that's proclaimed in the face of the most serious attempt at liquidating the Christian community that the church has ever faced. From 65 AD, from the reign of Nero, to 260 AD, to the reign of Valerian, it was a capital crime in the Roman Empire to be a Christian. Then there's a little break and it becomes a capital crime again. That is, you were killed. You were killed. And your family was killed. There are at least 3 serious attempts by the Roman government, which is the world government. There is no other government known. There is 3 serious attempts by the Roman government to utterly liquidate the Christian community. And in the face of all that, the teaching is universal and unequivocal. You may not use violence. You may not engage in war, and you may not use it for personal self-defense. And you know how strong the teaching is? Teaching is this strong. In those 300 years, violence was not just a sin. Violence, along with apostasy, denial of the faith, was an excommunicable offense. You were excommunicated forever if you took blood, even in self-defense. Now, these folks, obviously, it was clear in their mind that to love like Jesus loved meant that you could not slaughter people. You could not slit throats. You could not stick bayonets into the stomach, and so forth and so on. The 300 years closest to Jesus. Since that time, the Christians, of course, have been the great slaughterers. But that doesn't answer the question. The question is, the serious question is, if existence is an accident, then we can do what we want. It makes no difference whether you're a Francis of Assisi or a Hitler or a Hugh Hefner or anything else. You can go do what you want. Because it's all the sound and the fury signifying nothing. Or as Sartre says, life is a useless passion. Take drugs, get drunk, fall in love, don't do anything, sleep, commit suicide, doesn't make any difference if existence is just an accident. But if it is not an accident, then it's a gift. And if it's a gift, there's a giver, and if there's a giver, there's a purpose. And if one is a Christian, one believes that that purpose is communicated by the person of Jesus of Nazareth, the specially anointed from God, anointed Messiah Christ. And that person, Jesus of Nazareth, says, the way to live, love the Lord your God, whole heart, whole soul, whole mind, whole strength, love your neighbor as yourself. And then he interprets it by presenting a unique commandment to love as I have loved. The imitation of him is the way to live out that commandment of love, which commandment the church for 300 years universally understood meant the utter rejection of violence in human affairs, slaughter, killing. So, the question as it comes to you at this moment in time is something like this. There's a few of them. What is the purpose of existence? Number one. Well, you really got to go back further than that in order to do this properly. Your first step in the religious search, is this one here. Deciding for yourself, is existence an accident or gift? After you decide one or the other, if it's an accident, then you can go about building an existence however you want to build it. If it's a gift, then we find, then you got to go looking for, if the gift is a giver, what is the purpose for which existence is given to you? If you come to the understanding that the purpose, that the person who tells you the purpose of human existence is in fact Jesus of Nazareth, if he is the anointed one, the Messiah, the Christ, it communicates the purpose of human existence, how to overcome evil and death, then one has to ask is, what is it that Jesus says? Love the Lord your God, whole heart, whole soul, whole mind, whole strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. This I command you, love as I have loved. And then you got to ask yourself, does that love allow you to kill people, to slaughter people? Can you picture Jesus killing and slaughtering people? Is that the image that's given in the New Testament from birth to death? Very serious problem. And I think that maybe a way to kind of sum this up is to look at it this way. What happened to change things? How did things get changed after 300 years? What happened was, in the year 313, Constantine, the emperor of Rome, the pagan emperor of Rome, issued something called the Edict of Milan, which was an edict of toleration. The church was no longer to be persecuted. In 312, you could not be a member of the fighting Roman army and be a Christian. By 416, 104 years later, you could not be a member of the fighting Roman army unless you were a Christian. The thing had utterly reversed itself in the 104 years, whatever it is, after Constantine. What happened? What happened was that phenomena that we call the Constantinization of the Christian church. You must understand that Constantine was not satisfied with simply allowing Christians to exist. Why, by golly, the first thing he did was he allowed them to exist so well that he went out and began to use his armies to take the pagan temples away from pagans and to give them to Christians. You know what that meant? For 300 years, the church, for all practical purposes, was a non-temple religion. The Eucharist was celebrated since the earliest days of the church in homes and so forth, wherever they could gather, where two or more are gathered in my name. Constantine takes the temples, and he, using the Roman army, takes the temples from the pagans, pagan religion, and gives them to the Christians. Now you must understand, the temples are luxury property rights. You don't need them. You don't need them. However, there are always people of necessity around. The people of luxury cannot keep the people of necessity off their back unless they use violence. When you have more than you need, and someone over here doesn't have enough to live, you better have the sword or the gun to keep them off your back, because you can't appeal to reason or faith or goodwill. In other words, what happened to start with was the church began to accumulate luxury property, property in no way, shape, or form needed for 300 years. But once it accumulated, it had to defend it. And how could it be preaching on the inside of that luxury property a doctrine inconsistent with what it had to do on the outside to defend it? And how can it do it today? Secondly, with Constantine, one of the things that happened, the catechumenate process was the process by which people were brought into Christianity. Children were always baptized in Christianity from the earliest documents that we have beyond the Gospel, beyond the New Testament. That's not what I'm talking about. But the norm was adults came in. And the way the adult came into the Christian life, the Christian church, Christian community, was through a process called a catechumenate, which could take anywhere from a year to 7 or 8 years. And the person would be brought in, and it wasn't just that the person was taught the articles of faith, Trinity, or something like that. What the person was brought into was an experience of these teachings, plus a development of the person's moral life. That is, the community would nurture the person in putting on the mind of Christ. And when they felt the person was ready, he or she would be baptized. Long and extensive process of prayer, mutual interaction, and so forth and so on. Year to 7 years. Constantine comes, and what does he do? He takes the Roman army, sends the Roman army out. They grab the local chieftain, stick a knife to his neck, and say, become a Christian, or else you die. And he said, oh, sure. So he becomes a Christian. And of course, the whole tribe comes with him. That's the structure of government. And now we have a new process of bringing people into Christianity. Now the question becomes, isn't there a certain watering down that occurs under those circumstances? A watering down of the teaching and the doctrine. One, finally, final step in the process was, we all hear about these wonderful things called the 7 ecumenical councils of the church in the first 1,000 years. The first of those ecumenical councils that determined all kinds of things, the first of those ecumenical councils was presided over, and affirmed not by the Pope and not by the bishops. It was called and presided over and affirmed by the Emperor Constantine, who was a pagan. Constantine called the Council of Nicaea. Constantine began to have input as to who was to become bishop. The person responsible for the just war theory, the original person responsible for the just war theory, St. Ambrose. St. Ambrose, Augustine was his student. Augustine elaborated, and is the theory that we have now. But Ambrose wrote it first. He's the first person to put it together. Ambrose went from pagan dictator of Milan to Archbishop of Milan in 8 days. Now that's conversion for you. That's about 40 years after Constantine. All I'm saying to you, and I'm giving you this information, why? Because it comes down to you at any given moment, the question, you make your choice, existence or gift. If it's a gift, what's the purpose? You make your choice just like I do or anyone else does with the question that Jesus asked Peter, who do you say I am? If you say Jesus is the Messiah, you mean he has God's eye view on things, huh? And his teachings are the truth about what the purpose of existence is and how to come over and even that. And he says, love the Lord your God, whole heart, whole soul, whole mind, whole strength, love your neighbor as yourself, do this and eternal life is yours. And the unique commandment, love as I have loved, that interprets the love. And therefore, if you can picture Jesus doing something, you can do it. If you can't picture, then you can't do it. The imitation of Christ. But there is a need to be honest about it. You don't have to choose that existence is a gift. You don't have to choose Jesus as the Messiah, and so forth and so on. Be honest with yourself. But if you choose it, then be honest with yourself about what's said. Let me conclude with this remark. You know, for Christians, the Christian religion, what's always talked about is Jesus' teachings of nonviolent love and nonviolence are impractical. Oh, if everyone in the world was nonviolent, well, my goodness, then we'd be nonviolent. But everyone isn't nonviolent, so we can't be they're just impractical. Well, we got to look for that place in the gospel where Jesus says, you are relieved from following my teachings until everyone else in the world follows them. Now, where does he say that? He doesn't say that, of course, and that's not what he did himself. Think about it. The Christian religion, we say his teachings on nonviolent love are impractical. And we can talk about that in the question and answer period if you want. But think about the Christian religion. The Christian religion is a religion that is in utter improbability, that's based on an utter impossibility. The Christian religion is a religion that is in utter improbability based on an utter impossibility. What's the utter improbability? The utter improbability that the Christian religion is based on is that a person 2,000 years ago rose from the dead. Now, I've buried a few people, and I don't expect to see them when I go back to Boston. Not one of them. You know, I got a few friends that use drugs and alcohol, or so forth and so on, and in their wildest kinds of things, you know. They don't talk about expecting, of seeing the friend they buried next to them, No, if someone rises from the dead, that's utterly improbable. Utterly improbable. But on top of all that, the utter improbability is based on an utter impossibility. What? That person that lived 2,000 years ago is God. Is God. Is the creator of the universe. Is divine. That's impossible. The Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And all things were made through him, excuse me, and without him nothing was made that has been made. And the Word was made flesh. That's saying that the creator of the universe is Jesus of Nazareth. It's God, the Word. That's impossible. The Christian religion is an utter improbability based on another utter impossibility. But look, if you accept the utter improbability, and if you accept the utter impossibility and call yourself Christian, isn't it a little weak and anticlimactic to say that the teachings are impractical? I conclude, in terms of Christianity, the teaching is that the person who uttered the word that brought the universe into existence is the person who uttered the words of the Sermon on the Mount. From whence do we get the authority to change one syllable? So, why don't I stop there, and we'll just stand up now for maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes, just to get a little break, and then we'll come back and questions and reflections and talk and so forth and so on.